Hi. So in class over the past like 2 weeks, couple days, however long, we've been talking about the criminal justice system and how this pertains to racism and ableism. And so one of the first things that we did with this is Dr. K created a Padlet for us where we each added two sources that we found online to one of three different categories. We had policing, the court system, and the correctional system. So I'm only gonna go into one of the articles I put because the other one wasn't like as long or nearly as interesting to me. But the one that I'm gonna talk about, I put it under the correctional system little category. It's from The Intercept and it's called How Racist is Solitary Confinement. Um, and basically the article goes into a study of 45,000 inmates in New York, and it found that Black and Hispanic people are more likely to be punished with solitary confinement and a lot less likely to receive diagnoses of mental illnesses. And so some of the statistics that were found in the study, Black people were found to be 2.5 times more likely to be punished with solitary confinement, and 40% of Black inmates experience solitary confinement during their incarceration, compared to only 26% of Hispanic inmates and only 9% of white inmates. That is a crazy, crazy disparity. And obviously everyone knows that solitary confinement would suck, but like the one main thing that like isn't really talked about is how horrible of an impact it has on your mental health. Like it will exacerbate any mental illnesses you have, if not create them. Like if you think about it, there is no better environment for mental health issues to be fostered in than alone in a dark, cold room by yourself, the tiny, tiny room for like 22 to 24 hours a day. And not only that, but this article, in addition to like giving statistics from the study, it also goes into individual experiences of different inmates of color, things they experienced while they were incarcerated. So one of these ex-inmates, was Damian Jackson, who was in Rikers adolescent jail, and he was involved in a report on the brutality in this adolescent jail, and he reported that a white correctional officer, trigger warning for racism, violence, everything bad, the white correctional officer called him a black fuck and then a black motherfucker before beating him and three of his fellow inmates with several different objects and then throwing them all into solitary confinement. So not only are you stuck in this tiny cell alone, like not having anything to do, you're also being treated so horribly and in horrible conditions. Like I cannot imagine anyone coming out of that mentally well. Like I don't think that that's possible for anyone. So the other thing that the article talked about is how Black people and Hispanic people are a lot less likely to be diagnosed with mental illnesses. So it says in the article that white inmates are likely to be diagnosed with a mental illness within 7 days of their incarceration. And this is not the same case for Black and Hispanic inmates. It takes way longer. And another thing that the article talks about is that white inmates are more likely to be diagnosed with like bipolar, schizophrenia, anxiety, depression, mental illnesses like that are well treated with medication. And Black inmates are more likely to be diagnosed with like a mood disorder or anti-personality disorder, and these diagnoses do not what's the word I'm trying to find? I don't know. But they do not get the same like empathy that the illnesses that white people are more often diagnosed with do. They're often seen as more just like aggressive, like mean, just bad people and that type of thing, rather than like being empathized with for having a mental illness. And another thing about that is that oftentimes whoever is diagnosing these people, it's mostly like it's like very subjective, up to personal opinion. So a lot of times it's like if a inmate of color is being evaluated with a psychiatrist, they're going to use just like their personal experience. So like if the inmate is like kind of a dick to them, they're just going to be like, yeah, antisocial personality disorder. Even if the inmate's just being a dick because obviously they're being treated horrible, and I'm sure the psychiatrist is not any better. And so like it's just a horrible system, and then whenever they have that like diagnosis plastered on them, it like sticks with you, and then everyone after that who like sees that is just like, oh, like you're aggressive, you're mean, you're like whatever. And so it ends up being really, really bad, like really horrible that they even have a diagnosis, because a lot of times it's not even accurate. Anyways, so that's what I shared with my group after we put the sources on the Padlet. We had little groups that we shared with, and that's what I shared with mine. And what really, I was in a group with Allie and Courtney, and what really stood out to me from them was Allie had this article from Time magazine, and it talked about this one autistic boy who was killed by police. And so this was obviously in the policing category. But yeah, so police brutality is something that is talked about a lot, like how it relates to racism. It's talked about a lot in the media, especially with the BLM movement and everything. Like, it's really being pushed out there more, which is awesome. But what's not awesome is that disability isn't being talked about with this at all. And they really do intersect, like we talked about before. So if and like in this case, if a person of color has autism, like they're not going to react the same way that a neurotypical person would to police orders and instructions and everything. And police aren't trained on how to deal with people of varying mental capacities or varying levels of ability. So like their normal protocol with like the flashlight in the face and the get out of the vehicle, like all that like scary stuff, that's obviously going to be very, very traumatic for someone with autism, and they're not going to respond well because like people with autism hate like bright lights, loud noises, all that type of stuff. And so their negative response to this is going to be taken by the police officers as like resisting arrest or being aggressive or something like that, which then leads to violence, which is what happened in this case, which is so sad. And so obviously what needs to be done is there needs to be more training, but even when there is training, it's like not adequate, and it's just, there's a whole lot of problems. But I'll get more into that later. But one thing that Allie brought out from this article that really stood out to me, she brought out this quote from the victim's sister. Yeah, the victim's sister. And she said, it was easier to take out the threat, which was his brown skin, than to try to help him. Which that literally like gives me chills. Like that's exactly what it is. Like the system that we have now would rather just get rid of the problem, like take the threat away. Like they are taught more to like, you protect your own safety. Like you, like they're like taught violence. Like they're taught like they spend so much more time in training on like how to like shoot people than literally how to deal with people that don't have the same mental capacity as as a neurotypical person. Like that's absolutely insane. And then you wonder why like stuff like this happens. Anyways, moving away from that, I'll literally talk about it forever. But another thing we did like one of the next days in class is we came up with like a list of problems and solutions for these problems within groups. And so I'm going to pull up the problems that my group and I came up with and the solutions that we found. And so I was in a group with Hannah, and sorry, I'm trying to find this real quick. Oh, this is not right. Hold on, y'all. Here we are. I was in a group with Hannah and Daniela, and some of the problems we came up with were, like I was just talking about this, police being poorly trained with working with people with disabilities. The prison system is for profit and not for the rehabilitation of criminals. There's a lack of rehab sources for ex-convicted felons, false confessions, especially within people with like lower mental like capacities or like mental disabilities. too harsh of sentencing or unfair sentencing, solitary confinement, like I talked about with mine, life without parole or the death penalty for minors, the death penalty in general, and police are trained for violence instead of de-escalation, and lack of proper medical or psychiatric care within the prison system. And some of the solutions we came up with are better health care, less for-profit prisons, proper CO training, abolish solitary confinement altogether. That's for prison reform. And for policing reform, better de-escalation training, less use of force or violence, training on like no racial profiling or like ableism. It's obviously easier said than done. But another thing that we said was to send out social workers or mental health professionals to certain calls rather than police officers. And then for justice system reform, we had remove the death penalty, have better psychiatric evaluations, non-manipulatory or harsh, and oh my gosh, can't say this word, interrogation tactics. No racial profiling or ableism again. Provide more mental health support for minors and less harsh prison sentences, and then also making sure that like juries are like racially what's the word? I don't know. That there isn't disparities in like how what percent of Black people are in the population versus in a jury. I don't know how to say that more eloquently, but you get what I'm saying. But yeah, those are some of the problems and solutions we came up with, and then we met up with another group. We met up with Maggie, Lucy, and Ash, and they had a lot more different problems and solutions and stuff, but some of the things that they had that we didn't were like missing white woman syndrome, which we talked about, which is offenders are held more accountable for crimes against white people, against Black individuals. I don't know. They had a lot more. I'm not going to go through the whole list because this video is already becoming super long, a lot longer than my other ones. But there's just so much to talk about with this topic. Like, even Dr. K said, like, we cut off this unit, but we could have kept going on forever. But, yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say about all of our stuff from this week.